What would you do if the deadliest apex predator cubs in the known galaxy decided that you of all people were their new favorite creature in the universe? That was the question racing through Lyra Vel'Shan's mind as she stared at the security footage, her silver hair falling across her face as she leaned closer to the monitor. There they were, all three of them, her cubs. The Vrenthari offspring she had spent 18 months raising from eggs, the same creatures whose species had toppled civilizations and whose adults could tear through reinforced titanium like wet paper. They were currently huddled around the station's water cooler, lapping contentedly at the dripping condensation, while a very confused human woman stood frozen beside them, a paper cup trembling in her hand. Lyra's pointed ears twitched with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was impossible. Vrenthari cubs did not leave their designated habitats. They did not follow strangers. They certainly did not drink from primitive human water dispensers when they had perfectly calibrated nutrient fountains in their enclosure. And yet here they were, for the third time this week, somehow escaping every security measure Lyra had implemented. The woman in the footage was Dr. Maya Chen, a xenobiology research assistant who had arrived at the Harmony station just 6 weeks ago. She was unremarkable by human standards, or so Lyra had assumed. Average height, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, warm brown eyes that always seemed to be quietly observing everything around her. She worked the night shift in the adjacent laboratory, running samples and organizing data while the rest of the station slept. Lyra had never spoken to her beyond brief nods in the corridor, but her cubs had apparently decided that Maya Chen was the most interesting person on this entire space station. And Lyra needed to understand why before the station commander found out and shut down her entire research program. The walk to the water cooler on Deck 7 took approximately 4 minutes. Lyra spent every second of it running through possible explanations. Vrenthari cubs imprinted on their handlers through a complex process involving pheromones, vocal patterns, and consistent presence. She had followed every protocol perfectly. She had raised Kex, Vera, and Thane from the moment they emerged from their translucent shells, feeding them by hand, speaking to them in the low tones that their species found soothing, sleeping in the habitat with them during their critical bonding phase. They were supposed to be bonded to her, only her. So why were they so obsessed with a human woman they had never officially met? Lyra rounded the corner and stopped dead in her tracks. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back against the wall, a datapad forgotten in her lap. Vera was curled up against her thigh, purring, a sound Lyra had never heard any of the cubs make before. Kex was draped across her shoulders like some kind of deadly scarf, his 6 legs carefully retracted so his claws wouldn't scratch her. And Thane, the largest and most aggressive of the 3, was lying with his massive head in her lap, his 4 eyes closed in what could only be described as absolute contentment. Maya looked up as Lyra approached, and her expression shifted from peaceful to mortified in an instant. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, carefully keeping her body still so as not to disturb the cubs. "They were here when I came for my water break, and I didn't want to scare them by leaving, and then they just climbed on me, and I couldn't." She trailed off, clearly expecting to be reprimanded. Lyra said nothing for a long moment. She was too busy processing the impossible scene before her. Vrenthari cubs were not affectionate creatures. They tolerated their handlers because they recognized the scent of safety and food. They did not seek out comfort. They did not purr. They certainly did not fall asleep on random humans like oversized house cats. "How long have you been sitting there?" Lyra finally managed to ask. Maya glanced at her watch. "About 2 hours. 2 hours." This woman had sat motionless on a cold metal floor for 2 hours because she didn't want to disturb alien creatures that could have killed her with a single swipe of their razor-sharp claws. Either she was completely insane, or there was something about Maya Chen that Lyra had drastically underestimated. Over the following days, Lyra found herself conducting an investigation unlike any she had performed before. She reviewed every piece of security footage involving Maya Chen, tracked her movements through the station, analyzed her work schedules, and even pulled her personnel file, which required convincing the station's AI that this was absolutely essential for xenobiological research purposes. What she discovered only deepened the mystery. Maya Chen was quiet. That was the first notable pattern. She moved through the station like a ghost, speaking only when spoken to, eating her meals alone in the observation deck, where she could watch the stars. working her shifts with meticulous focus and then retreating to her quarters without engaging in the social activities that most humans seem to crave. She had no close friends on the station. She received no personal communications from Earth. Her psychological evaluation from 3 years ago noted a tendency toward isolation following a personal tragedy. But the details were classified beyond Lyra's clearance level. What Lyra could see, however, was how Maya interacted with the world around her. She noticed the way Maya always left a portion of her food near the ventilation grate, where a colony of small, harmless station organisms had made their home. She observed Maya spending her breaks in the botanical section, not to socialize with the gardeners, but simply to sit among the plants in silence. She watched footage of Maya discovering an injured maintenance drone and spending 45 minutes carefully repairing its damaged wing sensor instead of simply reporting it for replacement. There was a gentleness to Maya Chen that radiated from her like heat from a star. And somehow, impossibly, Lyra's cubs had sensed it from 3 decks away, through reinforced bulkheads and security barriers. The next escape happened during Lyra's sleep cycle, which meant she received the alert directly to her neural implant at 3 in the morning. She stumbled out of bed, threw on her fitted tactical jacket over her sleep clothes, and ran to deck 7, expecting the worst. What she found was Maya Chen teaching Thane how to drink from the water cooler. "You have to push the button with your snout," Maya was saying, her voice soft and patient. "Like this, see? Push, and the water comes out," she demonstrated, filling a cup and holding it out for the massive cub. Thane watched with intense focus, then carefully extended his primary snout and pressed the dispenser button. Water sprayed out in an arc, splashing across his face. He recoiled in surprise, and Maya laughed a genuine, delighted sound that seemed to transform her entire presence. "That's okay. First try is always messy. Here, let me help you." Lyra stood in the doorway, watching this human woman speak to the most dangerous infant in the galaxy like he was a slightly clumsy puppy learning a new trick. Something twisted in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. "You're going to get yourself killed," Lyra said, stepping into the room. Maya, startled, nearly dropping the water cup. "Handler Vel'Shan, I'm so sorry. I tried to contact you, but the cubs were already here when I arrived, and I thought if I kept them calm until they could kill you," Lyra interrupted. "One bite, one swipe of their claws. Do you understand that?" Maya met her gaze, and for a moment, Lyra saw something in those warm brown eyes that stopped her cold. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even defiance. It was a quiet, bone-deep understanding. "I know," Maya said simply, "but they're not going to hurt me." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because they're children." Maya reached down and scratched behind Thane's auditory ridge in exactly the spot that Lyra knew would make him melt. The cub made that impossible purring sound again and pressed into her touch. Scared, lonely children who miss their parents and don't understand why they were taken from their world and put in a cold metal box. "They're not hunting me, Handler Vel'Shan. They're looking for comfort." The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. She had raised these cubs from eggs. She had followed every scientific protocol, maintained optimal environmental conditions, provided appropriate nutrition and stimulation. But she had never once considered that they might be lonely, that they might need something beyond physical care, that the sterile, controlled environment she had created might feel like a prison to creatures whose instincts demanded wide-open spaces and the warmth of a pack. Maya must have seen something shift in Lyra's expression, because her own face softened. "I'm not trying to overstep," she said gently. "They're your cubs. You obviously care about them. I come here to think sometimes. The water cooler is stupid, but it's one of the only places on the station that actually feels a little bit alive, you know? The condensation on the outside, the gurgling sounds, the way the light reflects off the water. I guess they felt that too. After that night, something changed." Lyra stopped trying to prevent the cubs from reaching deck 7 and instead started accompanying them. She told herself it was for security purposes, that she needed to monitor their behavior in uncontrolled environments, that this was valuable research data. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than that. She wanted to see Maya. She wanted to understand how this quiet, lonely human had unlocked something in her cubs that 18 months of careful scientific handling had failed to achieve. And maybe though she would never admit this to anyone, not even herself, she wanted to feel whatever it was that drew the cubs to Maya's presence. Because Lyra was lonely too. She had left her homeworld 3 years ago to pursue xenobiological research, driven by an ambition that had seemed so important at the time. She had sacrificed friendships, family connections, the comfortable rhythms of her culture, all in pursuit of scientific achievement. And she had succeeded. She was one of the foremost experts on Vrenthari development in the known galaxy. She had published papers that changed her field. She had earned the respect of her peers and the funding of major research institutions. But somewhere along the way, she had forgotten what it felt like to simply sit with another person and exist together in comfortable silence. Maya taught her that again, one water cooler visit at a time. They would sit on the floor of Deck 7, usually around midnight, with the cubs sprawled around them like a protective barrier of scales and claws. Maya would tell stories about Earth, about forests that stretched as far as the eye could see, about oceans that contained more life than humanity had ever cataloged, about her grandmother's garden, where she had learned that the most important things in life couldn't be rushed. And Lyra would find herself sharing things she had never told anyone, about the sister she had left behind, about the doubt that crept in during long nights in the research facility, about how sometimes when she looked at the stars, she couldn't remember which one was home. The crisis came without warning, as crises always do. A cascade failure in the station's atmospheric processing system, triggered by a micrometeorite strike that should have been deflected by the outer shields. One moment, Lyra was reviewing her research notes in her quarters. The next, alarms were screaming, emergency lights were strobing, and the station AI was announcing in its maddeningly calm voice that Deck 7 was experiencing critical oxygen depletion. Deck 7, where Maya worked the night shift, where the cubs had almost certainly gone looking for their favorite human, Lyra ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her heart pounding against her ribs, her pointed ears ringing with the sound of the alarms. She grabbed an emergency oxygen pack from a wall station without breaking stride, already calculating how long Maya could survive in a depleted atmosphere, how long the cubs could hold their breath, how many minutes she had before this became a recovery operation instead of a rescue. The door to Deck 7 was sealed, emergency protocols locking it against the compromised atmosphere beyond. Lyra's security clearance wasn't high enough to override it. She slammed her palm against the access panel again and again, feeling her calm fracture with each rejection. Override denied. Atmospheric breach in progress. Please evacuate to let me through. She screamed at the panel. There are people in there. Let me through. Clearance insufficient. Please contact. A hand closed over hers, firm and steady. Lyra spun to find Dr. Maya Chen standing beside her, an emergency mask dangling from her neck and 3 very agitated Vrenthari cubs pressing close to her legs. I got out just before the doors sealed, Maya said, her voice slightly breathless, but remarkably calm. The cubs were faster than me. They practically dragged me to the exit. Lyra stared at her. Then she stared at the cubs. Then, before she could think about what she was doing, she threw her arms around Maya and held her tight. I thought you were dead, she whispered into Maya's shoulder. I thought I lost you. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Maya's arms came up around her, warm and solid and real. I'm okay, Maya murmured. We're all okay. The cubs knew something was wrong before the alarms even went off. They came and got me. They saved my life. Lyra pulled back just enough to look at Maya's face, to confirm that she was really there, really alive, really whole. What she saw in those warm brown eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was something deeper. Something that looked a lot like the feeling that had been growing in Lyra's chest for weeks now, quiet and persistent as starlight. Vrenthari cubs don't protect non-pack members, Lyra said slowly. It goes against every instinct in their biology. They should have fled to safety and left you behind. Maya smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Lyra had ever seen. Maybe they decided I'm pack, behind them. Thane pressed his massive head against both of their backs, pushing them closer together. Vera chirped in what sounded like approval. And Kex, the smallest and most mischievous of the 3, began that impossible purring sound that Lyra had only ever heard them make around Maya. The repairs to Deck 7 took 3 days. During that time, Lyra filed an extensive report with the station commander, explaining the cubs' behavior and arguing for an expansion of her research parameters. She framed it in scientific language, studying the effects of human emotional presence on Vrenthari social development. exploring the possibility of cross-species pack bonding, investigating the role of environmental enrichment in predator cub welfare. But the commander wasn't fooled. "You want to let them keep visiting the water cooler," Commander Thelos said, her four eyes blinking in an expression that Lyra had learned to interpret as amused skepticism. "With Dr. Chen, it's a valuable research opportunity and a chance to keep spending your evenings with the human who makes you smile like that." Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what your handler Vel'Shan," the commander's voice was gentle now. "I have served on 47 different stations over the course of my career. I have witnessed over 100 interspecies relationships form between my crew members. I know what connection looks like, even when the people involved are too stubborn or too scared to name it." Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then quietly she said, "Is it allowed? Under station regulations? There is nothing in the regulations against forming personal relationships with colleagues, so long as it doesn't interfere with professional duties." The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "And between you and me, I've never seen those cubs so well adjusted. Whatever you and Dr. Chen are doing, it's working. Don't let protocol get in the way of something good." The water cooler on Deck 7 became legendary over the following months. Crew members would stop by during their breaks just to witness the bizarre sight: a stoic alien researcher and a quiet human scientist, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 3 apex predator cubs who behaved like overgrown puppies. Someone started leaving extra cups near the cooler. Someone else installed a small bench so they wouldn't have to sit on the cold floor. The botanical team donated a potted plant that reminded Maya of her grandmother's garden. And slowly, one small kindness at a time, the lonely corner of Deck 7 transformed into the heart of Harmony Station. But for Lyra, the real magic happened in the quiet moments. In the way Maya's hand would find hers during their late-night conversations. In the soft sound of Maya's laughter when Kex got water up his snout. In the warmth of falling asleep, shoulder to shoulder, while the cubs formed a protective circle around them. In the absolute certainty that she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. One evening, as the station rotated slowly past a binary sunset that painted the observation windows in shades of gold and crimson, Maya turned to Lyra with an expression that made her heart skip in tandem. "Can I tell you something?" Maya asked. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. "When I came to this station, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. I'd lost everyone I cared about. I thought if I went far enough away from Earth, far enough away from everything that reminded me of what I'd lost, maybe the emptiness would stop hurting so much." She paused, her eyes glistening. But it didn't. It just got quieter. Lyra reached out and took Maya's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the steadiness of her pulse. "And now," Maya smiled through her tears, "now I have 3 extremely dangerous alien children who think I'm their favorite water fountain, and a brilliant alien researcher who pretends she's only interested in me for science." Lyra laughed, a sound she barely recognized from herself. "The science is very important, of course it is." Maya squeezed her hand. "But can I tell you what I've learned? The most important discovery I've ever made?" "Please." Maya leaned in close, her forehead resting against Lyra's, her breath warm and soft. "Love finds you wherever you are. Even if you're standing at a water cooler at 3 in the morning on a space station 1,000 light years from home. Even if you're surrounded by predator cubs who followed you there because they could sense what your heart needed before you knew it yourself." She pulled back just enough to meet Lyra's eyes. "They didn't follow me because I was special, Lyra. They followed me because I was lonely. And they stayed because they found something worth staying for." Thane rumbled contentedly at their feet. Vera chirped. And Kex, ever the troublemaker, reached up and pressed the water cooler button with his snout, sending a spray of water cascading over all of them. Maya laughed. Lyra laughed. And somewhere in the vast, cold, infinite universe, one small corner of a space station had become warm with something that needed no translation in any language. Home. The cubs never stopped visiting the water cooler. As they grew, they had to duck their increasingly massive bodies through the doorway, their claws clicking against the metal floor in a rhythm the station crew learned to recognize. They became ambassadors in a way no formal program could have achieved, proof that even the most fearsome creatures in the galaxy could be gentle, could be taught, could choose connection over instinct. And at the center of it all, sitting on their worn bench beneath the potted plant that had somehow grown into a small tree, Lyra and Maya watched their strange little family thrive. They published papers together. They developed new protocols for interspecies bonding. They received offers from prestigious research institutions across the galaxy. But they never left Harmony Station, because some discoveries couldn't be replicated in a laboratory. And the most important research of their lives was happening right there, in the quiet moments between heartbeats. In the space where two lonely souls had found each other and built something beautiful. And every night, when the station lights dimmed and the corridors grew quiet, three Vrenthari predators, no longer cubs, but massive, powerful creatures who could have ruled any planet they chose, curled up around the two people who had taught them that strength and softness were not opposites. That love was not weakness. That home was not a place, but a feeling you carried with you, wherever you went. The water cooler gurgled softly in the darkness. The stars wheeled past the observation windows. And in that small, impossible pocket of warmth and light, the universe felt a little less vast, a little less cold, a little less alone. Because that's what love does. It finds you. It follows you. And if you're lucky enough to recognize it, it becomes your favorite place to be.